Imagine a scenario where, right at your doorstep, a set of instructions is needed to avoid falling into a treacherous romantic entanglement with a stunning woman, or risking inhaling tobacco smoke from a bamboo pipe rivaling the size of your own arms. This is the dark side that looms over Vietnam. Throughout the 2nd to 19th centuries, the country was ruled by 4 distinct dynasties: Lê, Giong, Lê, again, and Nguyen. During the periods of the Lê and Lý dynasties, they emerged as defenders who repelled Mongol invasions and resisted Chinese occupations, thus preserving the nation's integrity and promoting its unification. Subsequently, the Nguyen dynasty focused on territorial expansion. It wasn't until the mid-19th century that the French established their colonial rule on Vietnamese soil. Countless Vietnamese engaged in an unwavering struggle for independence, facing imprisonment for their cause. Later, control of the territory passed into Japanese hands in 1940. Only in 1945, after the conclusion of World War II, did the country finally proclaim itself a sovereign nation. However, this chapter does not mark the end of Vietnam's quest for autonomy. France insisted on recapturing control of the nation, thereby precipitating the Indochina War in 1946, where Vietnam ultimately emerged victorious. Subsequently, the United States became involved in the Second Indochina War, which took place between 1955 and 1975, fought between South Vietnam and North Vietnam, supported by communist factions. This tumultuous phase culminated in the country's reunification in 1975 under the banner of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam as a result of the Northern victory, and consequently, American military forces withdrew from Vietnamese soil. Currently, the country maintains a socialist-oriented government, remaining in a state of ongoing progress. However, a painful legacy persists after the war: Agent Orange. This chemical compound was sprayed by American troops between 1961 and 1971, leaving a painful legacy that affects millions of people in Vietnam. According to the Vietnam Association, the U.S. disseminated about 80 million liters of herbicides on Vietnamese soil, as well as in areas of Cambodia and Laos. The primary intention of this act was to eliminate the enemy's sources of food. The extremely hazardous chemical agent, known as dioxin, emerged as one of the most lethal substances and can trigger severe illnesses. The persistence of this chemical in Vietnamese lands and waterways has contaminated their ecosystems, making both plants and fish highly toxic. Nearly 4.8 million Vietnamese citizens were exposed to this substance, resulting in almost 1 million cases of various illnesses, such as birth defects, dermatological conditions, and autoimmune disorders. Liver disorders, psychosocial repercussions, neurological abnormalities, and gastrointestinal system dysfunctions are some of the adverse outcomes. It is even more regrettable that among those affected, 192,000 are children. In response, the United States government has directed millions of resources to mitigate these consequences. However, several scientists warn that future generations may also continue to suffer the effects of this legacy. A chemical agent expert concluded that it will take 6 to 12 generations for dioxin levels to finally decrease. Amidst the adversities, a positive news emerges in Vietnam, a story of triumph in the realm of economic development. After economic reforms were implemented in 1986, Vietnam overcame its status as one of the world's poorest nations, transforming into a middle-income economy. Over the last 2 decades, its gross domestic product, GDP, expanded 3.6 times, while poverty rates experienced a reduction of over 10%. The country's GDP reached $413.81 billion in 2022. In addition, Vietnam's per capita GDP stands at $4,163.50. The forecast is that by the end of 2023, these values will rise to $449.09 billion and $4,475 respectively. Income disparity is also gradually decreasing over the decades, indicating that a greater number of people are leaving poverty behind and ascending to the middle class. This becomes particularly evident in urban areas, where the disparity between social strata went from a difference of 7.6 times in 2026 to merely 5.3 times in 2020. Despite this, there still exists a portion of 4.4% of the Vietnamese population living below the poverty line, encompassing around 4.3 million individuals. These people reside in precarious housing, with spaces barely exceeding 3 square meters, and have only just enough resources to ensure their subsistence. This situation largely helps to understand why fraudulent schemes and theft are still prevalent in certain regions, such as romantic ploys. As many travelers recognize, nightlife in Vietnam attracts many tourists, with one of the most renowned nighttime destinations being Saigon, also known as Ho Chi Minh City. However, if someone believes they will find the love of their life during such escapades, it is imperative to reconsider that notion. In the corners of Vietnam, cases of cunning romantic ploys are numerous. A tactic often used is the so-called bar girl scam. The charming ladies who perform their roles in the nightlife establishments approach with ease, request an expensive drink, and subsequently share a story full of personal tragedy. Through this artifice, they manage to gain the sympathy of the unsuspecting and thus financially exploit them. In most instances, it is revealed that these young women work for the club itself and operate on commissions. The most disheartening outcome is when these women request money loans and then disappear without a trace. Another frequent scheme is the travel scam, in which they establish contact through social media platforms or dating websites and persuade the unsuspecting to visit them. They will readily offer to coordinate the details of your trip, requesting that you make the corresponding payments. However, once they have received the money, they will vanish from your radar. Furthermore, the sugar daddy scam is well known, in which they will ask you to cover all their expenses in exchange for companionship and sexual favors. Often, these individuals have multiple victims, aiming to maximize their gains. An incident of this nature resulted in a man shelling out $139,000. A 54-year-old Vietnamese citizen residing in the United States contacted a 39-year-old woman living in Ho Chi Minh City through an online dating website. He wanted the woman to travel to the U.S., but she demanded payment of $139,000 as part of visa fees. After the man transferred the amount, the woman disappeared completely. An additional alarming aspect relates to wallet thefts. Despite the low crime statistics in Vietnam, theft ranks as the most common offense. Especially as night falls, when many streets lack proper lighting, the scene becomes conducive for the activity of petty criminals. These offenders are also present in densely populated areas where numerous distractions can divert your attention. Many of them operate in groups or gangs to avoid detection. The identity of these wrongdoers is diverse, encompassing men, women, and even children. Certain individuals use children to divert your attention by making purchase requests on their behalf. And as soon as you take your wallet out of your hand to fulfill the request, someone snatches it suddenly. Such incidents primarily occur in places frequented by a younger and tourist-oriented audience, such as Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, and Nha Trang. For this reason, travelers should exercise great caution when selecting their accommodation options. Often, reality significantly diverges from the idyllic images present on websites, forcing you to traverse dark alleys to reach your hotel or Airbnb rental. This situation can be inherently dangerous for tourists, with particular relevance to women. Beyond the pickpocketing gangs, a situation Vietnam seems unable to shake off is its notorious traffic anarchy. This roadway disorder has been pointed out by tourists as one of the most hazardous driving environments. The challenge of traffic has become a deterrent for some expatriates considering trips to the country. The traffic situation is so alarming that 30 individuals lose their lives daily due to transportation-related incidents. These tragic episodes, for the most part, stem from a lack of adherence to norms, as the majority of drivers view traffic rules not as legal mandates but rather as informal suggestions. There's even a peculiar approach pedestrians adopt when crossing roads in Vietnam: don't stop. Given the intense traffic congestion, waiting for drivers to slow down results in a nearly impossible crossing. People tend to step onto the road promptly and proceed to the other side without hesitation. Skillful motorcyclists often maneuver around pedestrians without even tapping the brakes, lending an almost magical quality to the scene. Interestingly, Vietnam is also marked by the presence of a tobacco pipe known as the Tho Lao. If you embark on a journey to northern Vietnam and decide to visit a tea house, you might come across individuals enjoying tobacco through a notably sized bamboo pipe. This unique apparatus is an emblematic example of the traditional Vietnamese water pipe and has gained widespread popularity among both the young and the elderly. A significant number of people have chosen to replace conventional cigarettes with Tho Lao, motivated by the perception that its negative influence is lower. However, it's important to note that this pipe carries a higher amount of nicotine and exhibits a greater degree of addictive potential compared to cigarettes. The nicotine concentration is so excessively high that those unfamiliar with Tho Lao often find themselves fainting shortly after the first experience. Therefore, extreme caution is necessary. Meanwhile, a concerning emerging trend in Vietnam is human trafficking. The country has been labeled as a hotspot for this activity in the region. Most victims are trafficked to foreign nations. However, law enforcement authorities assert that cases of domestic trafficking are also on the rise. Around 440 incidents of human trafficking have been recorded, encompassing everything from sexual exploitation to labor exploitation, and even the trade of human organs. One particular ploy employed by traffickers is the promise of lucrative and easy jobs in foreign nations, involving illegal activities for the victims. If they wish to return, they are subjected to a high fee. Another strategy used is offering marriage or adoption. Subsequently, once the victim leaves Vietnam, all documents are confiscated, and they are compelled to undertake illicit work. Vietnamese authorities have directed significant efforts to eradicate this issue, and since 2018, they have rescued over 800 victims. Most of these victims emphasize unemployment as the predominant factor that led them to agree to the traffickers' proposals. Vietnam, a vibrant nation filled with a rich history and culture, faces these challenges. Despite the adversities, the country has shown considerable progress over the years. Based on its resilience, it's possible to aspire to a future where Vietnam overcomes its shadows and achieves continuous improvement.